learn how to turn an old quilt or a quilted jacket or vest that you may not like anymore or may not fit you anymore into something much more usable. Hi everybody, it's Claudia from Create with Claudia. Thanks so much for stopping by. Today, like I said in the promo, we're going to do a quick tutorial on how to turn a quilted item like the vest I showed you, or maybe an old quilt or an old quilt coat that you maybe don't wear anymore, doesn't fit you anymore, or is a little frayed in areas. We're going to turn it into something else, and in particular, I'm going to turn mine into placemats. I made this vest that you saw, and I'll show you here really quickly, a couple years ago for a video. I was all proud I was going to make this quilt coat. I just thought, you know, the colors, I really love the colors in this, by the way. It has nothing to do with the stripes or anything like that. It's all because I can't make clothes. And I did a video on the 10 things I learned and why I would never do a quilt coat again. The sleeves didn't fit, so I ended up trying to make it into a vest. It's not finished really nicely. The pockets are, let me show you, are just really teeny tiny. I don't know anything about making clothes, so I'm going to stick to quilts. But I have this. It's been sitting in my closet, and my daughter has always really loved the stripes as well. I used a bunch of batiks, various batiks that I thought blended well together, and I just think it's really pretty. So that's why I would never throw it out, because you know, I just can't throw anything fabric away. But it's been gathering dust. So I decided to do something with it, and my daughter just graduated college and now is moving off on her own, and we're so proud of her and happy for her. And I said, you know what, she's always loved the stripes, you know, this fabric that I made with the jelly roller, the strips of here. And I said, I'm just going to turn those into placemats for her new apartment. So that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to take this jacket that I will never, ever, ever wear and turn it into placemats. And it's a good way for you to think of maybe a different way to use something, maybe an old quilt that you don't use anymore. So here's the back of the jacket, which is really the main area that I'm going to be cutting out. But again, you can do this for a quilt or a quilt coat, you know, whatever you want to do. The nice thing is it's almost pre-made. Really, all you're going to do is cut this out and put the binding on. But we're going to sort of fiddle with it a little bit because, of course, I have my seams here. And then you can see these ridiculously tiny pockets. But it's almost finished for you, which makes it really quick and easy to do. So, like I said, you can see it's already been quilted. I quilted it in the ditch on this. The first thing I'm going to do is decide what size I want my placemats to be. Before I start that, though, I do want to tell you, you need a few supplies. You need a nice rotary cutter. I use these great clips when I'm doing the binding. And pins as well. If you have pins, you need some scissors, and then you need a nice long ruler, because depending on what you're making, my placemats I usually like to make 16 to 18 inches long and 12 inches or 14 inches high. I'll take a look, see how many I can get out of this. I'm guessing I can get 2, maybe 3. Or if I make them smaller, I could make 4 out of it. But I think we're going to try for 2 nice ones, and maybe I'll make some coasters with it too. But now I'll get my big ruler out. So I've decided on a size for these of 12 by 18. So the first thing I want to do is cut this open. Where I had the seam, you can see it on the inside. You can see how unfinished it is as well. So I'm going to very closely to that seam, I'm going to cut this apart. So let me get my good scissors. All right, here goes. It's always a little bittersweet cutting up something that you've made, at least for me. Maybe not for you, but I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to miss this coat at all. So I'm just going to carefully cut along there. I want to save as much fabric as I can, or much of the quilted fabric that I can. All right, so here is that back panel. Let me flip it over for you so you can see it. I mean, I really think it's a beautiful piece, but again, not for a coat. And now we're going to cut this into 12 by 18 rectangles. The nice thing also, because this is a straight line stitching, or excuse me, straight line, the strips are straight, I can use that as a guide when I'm cutting to measure. You might have something a little bit different, or it might be a little bit trickier when you have like maybe a quilt block or something you want to use. But that's what's nice about this, it makes it kind of easy. And you can use the ruler you have, usually is see-through, at least all the ones I have are, and so you can kind of judge underneath what it's going to look like, which will help guide you how you want to cut it out. And of course the other option is size-wise. I'm not sure how big this is yet. I'm going to measure it out and see how many placemats I can get out of this. So I'm just measuring on my cutting board here. Looks like it's about 34 inches across, and then about 25 inches this way. So let's see, I can probably get 25, 20, let's see. I can get I can split this into two 12-inch sections, and then let's see if I can get two. I might, you know what, if I make the placemats a little bit smaller, I think I might be able to get 4 out of this, which is really nice, because it's nice to have a set of 4 placemats. So yeah, let me straighten out. I'm going to straighten out first. Let me move that so you can see it. That would help. First thing I'm going to do is straighten out this edge and this edge, and then these two shorter ends, and then we'll see what we can still get out of it. Okay, so after trimming it up, you did lose a little bit, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get 4 out of this or not, but it's now 32 inches by 24 inches. So I can still get 12 across. Let me cut it in half first. That's the first thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to go measure from this, would help if I could show you, from this side in 12 inches. And I'm just going to cut a straight line. All right, here are my 2 strips. They're looking good. And let's see, what did I say they were again? They were 32 inches. So actually, I can get 4 out of this. Awesome. So I'm going to cut this one in half. So you're going to have 4 placemats that are going to end up 12 by 16. Again, that could change depending on how big your coat is, or a quilt or whatever, and how many you want to make. You can make bigger ones. You can even make, if you wanted, a table runner out of this. I could have done that too, or a table topper. This is what's so great about this project. It's so easy, so quick, and you can really tailor it to whatever you need. So now I'm going to cut this in half. And you'll see I'm using my board, my cutting board, to help me line up the straight edges. And I'm just going to come out here to 16 inches. And very much, and there, see, it's 32. Everything's looking good. Nice and even. Make sure it's even along. That's, these rulers and these cutting boards, you use them together, they're perfect for quilters. I mean, these lines can help you, the lines on here can help you line things up. I highly recommend, if you don't have a cutting service with lines like that, or measurements, or rulers with lots of measurements and lines on them, that you get something like that. And then you're just going to cut it in half, and I'll do that with the other one as well. Neither one of these is going to look the same, but that's okay. That's kind of fun. I like that. All right, here are my 4 placemats. I'm really loving the way these are turning out, and I'm telling you, these are going to get so much more use than the coat. So the next thing I need to do is put the binding on it. There's a little trim that came off there. I'm going to throw that away. The next thing I'm going to do is put the binding on it. So I'm going to show you how I make my binding. Normally, when I make a quilt, I don't know how you guys do it, or if you have ever done it before, I cut 2.5-inch strips of fabric, and I sew them. Again, normally this is how I do it for larger quilts. I'll sew them to the front and then hand stitch it on the back. In this case, because these are placemats, and they're probably going to be put in the washer quite a few times, you know, if they get dirty or something. I'm actually going to machine stitch my binding on. Makes it a lot more sturdy, I'm more comfortable with it, and again, it's much easier to wash. These were all leftover strips from various projects over the years, so I don't have any big pieces of this fabric. So I sort of hunted through my batiks, and I thought this might be a nice block. This sort of, color sort of goes with all of these colors, these real rich jewel tones, these darker jewel tones. So I'm going to use this fabric for my binding. And you need to calculate, I sort of guesstimate how much binding I'm going to need. So these were 12 by 16. So let me figure that out really quickly. I'll write it down and then I'll get back to you because it will take me a second to figure that out. All right, so the way I figure this out about how many binding strips I'm going to need to cut is I measured, they're 12 by 16 and I have 4 of them. So there's 2 sides that are 12 inches and 2 sides that are 16. So one placemat would be 24 inches on the shorter sides times 4, and that's 96 inches. And then the longer side is 16 inches, times 2 is 32, times 4 is 128. So I need a total of 224 inches of strips, of 2.5-inch strips, and I use 2.5-inch strips for this. So then the next thing I do, this is, I'm not a great math whiz, so generally width of fabric is 40 inches. The usable width of fabric, I should say. So 224, again, I'm not a math whiz, divided by 40, 5.60. So I'm going to use 6 strips. I might even use 7 because the corners, you'll see the corners get, you lose a lot of inches on the corners. So I'm going to use 7 strips that are 2.5 inches wide by width of fabric. And you'll see what I mean when you lose some of that, some of the inches off of it. But that's just to be safe. Yes, I'll probably have some strip left over, but that goes in my scrap bin, which I love. All right, so this is the fabric. It's a yard of fabric, and so here's the width of fabric. It's folded over, and I'm going to tell you a little trick now. You know how sometimes you cut a strip from a folded piece of fabric and you get a little lump in it, sort of when it's unfolded and pressed, you notice that it's not quite straight. The way to avoid that is press it really nicely and then line up that folded edge on the line on your cutting board, and that'll help get you that nice straight line or that nice straight binding strip. So I'm just going to cut 7 2.5-inch by width of fabric strips right now. All right, so I've cut my strips. I cut 7 of them, and then I'm going to start sewing the strips together. Now, because I've been doing this so long, I just eyeball them. I'll show you how I sew them together. I sew them together like this, almost like I form like a little L shape, an upside down L shape. But if you've never done it before, and usually what I do is I'll just sew from this corner to this corner and I eyeball it. That's not always the best practice, so if you've never done it before, you're going to want to draw a 45-degree line on here so you can follow that, and I'll show you how to do that one time. So this is my big ruler. It has that diagonal line, which just so happens to be 45 degrees, which is perfect. You're going to line that diagonal line, and I hope you can see this okay. It's kind of hard to see. There's the diagonal line along here, and I'm lining that up on the bottom of the wrong side of this strip, on the one edge. All right, like so. Just line it up, and then you're going to just mark. You're going to mark a line so you can see it. There's your 45-degree line, and that's the line you're going to sew on when you're joining your strips together. And I make one long strip, even though I have 4 different placemats. It's just easier for me to do it that way, and then they're all made at once. Then the next thing you're going to do is right sides facing. Now these are batiks, so they're easy to, you can just put them together because these don't actually, it's sort of hard to tell the back from the front. And you're just going to line up that line that you drew so that it touches that edge to that edge, and you're just going to sew along and just sew along there, okay? All right, so you can I used a navy thread, just hopefully you could see it a little bit more. You can see how it's sewn, and then I'm just going to keep adding to this. Actually, what I do is I pair up my strips. I sew 2 together at a time, and then those strips that I just made, I pair together until I have the binding as long as I want it. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to make into one long strip. Here you can see, just so you can see it better, you're going to cut away, of course, that background, the back fabric, but you can see how it came together nicely, and it's a nice straight line. All right, so here's my nice long strip. It's all pieced together. So the first thing I want to do is going to cut off these edges. See, this is what I meant by you're going to lose some of that fabric, which is why I add on some extra when I'm cutting my binding strips. Just leave a 1/4 inch. Make sure don't cut through that seam. It's easy to do. All right, so they're all trimmed. So now I'm going to take it over to my pressing surface. I'm going to press these seams open. It makes it a little bit flatter. Maybe you can see it better if I twist it a little bit this way. I'm going to press these seams open, and then what I'm going to do is, these are of course the wrong sides of the fabric. I am going to, if I can get it untangled, there we go, okay. I'm going to take it, and this is a long strip, so it takes a minute. You're just going to fold it over wrong sides together and just give a nice sharp press. So you're basically folding this long strip in half. And again, after you've pressed this seam flat, it should fold over nicely, and you're just going to keep pressing the entire binding strip. And then I'll show you how we put it on those placemats. All right, here it is, nicely pressed. That always takes a lot longer than I think it will. It's I love to bind, especially by hand, although we're not doing that today, but the pressing, it just seems to take forever. So I've pressed it in half, and on the one end, I've actually folded this in so you can have a nice smooth edge, not a raw edge. And then folded that in half. And now, all right, so this is where you're going to need pins or clips or both, depending on how you like to do it. So again, depending on how you do your binding, and you can bind this, if you're familiar with binding, you can do it whatever way you want. In this case, I'm going to do it on the back side and then machine stitch it onto the front. So I'm just going to start somewhere, and I'm going to pin it. This is that edge that was folded over on the back side, and I just like to keep that in place. And then I'm going to pin, I like to pin where I'm going to start. You want to leave a couple inches in here that you don't sew yet. That'll be sewn up later, okay? So I'm going to start here, and I always back stitch or do like the knot on my machine, depending on your machine, but I'll probably back stitch a couple stitches. I'm going to sew all the way to this edge, not all the way, excuse me, a 1/4 inch from this edge. I don't have one, but they have all kinds of tools to mark that little 1/4 inch. They have like binding tools. I eyeball it. Again, I'm teaching you bad habits here. I shouldn't do that. But you can go back and measure a 1/4 inch. Let me get a pin here. From this, I'm going to pull this down a little bit. From here, and then from here, and where they meet is that 1/4 inch point, and that's where you want to sew to on here. And then you're going to stop, and I back stitch there as well, and then I'll show you what we do next. In fact, I'm going to show you on close-up on the camera, on a different camera. So here's where that needle was. I'm going to back stitch here. And then I'm going to sew until a 1/4 inch past this edge. I'm using my 1/4 inch foot, if you can see that. That helps me measure with my measurements. And then I'm going to just measure, and you can mark it if you want, 1/4 inch from this edge of the piece back. And again, I just backstitch there. All right, and now you can see, hopefully you can see it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it back like so. And you're going to have, it's a little cumbersome with these long pieces of binding strip. this is gonna be a 45-degree angle, okay? And then you're gonna fold this over. So you can kind of feel underneath the 45-degree angle. Hopefully you saw that. Okay, I'm gonna do it again. So you're gonna fold this back and then fold this over like that. So it's flush with this edge. And then you can either pin, which is what I like to pin to keep it in place. You've got that 45-degree angle. You can kind of feel it under there. And then I'm going to start a 1/4 inch in. Let me get another pin so you can see it. This is a 1/4 inch from this side and then a 1/4 inch in. And you should be right where you ended your last strip right there. Of course, my hand is in the way. I'm so sorry about that. I don't usually film from this angle. So anyway, sorry about that. Let me explain that again. You're going to, once it's folded over, you're going to measure in a 1/4 inch from here and a 1/4 inch from the side. And then you're just going to start your stitching on that edge or on that point, okay? And hopefully you saw that better. So I'm going to, again, I have this nice 1/4 inch foot on here, which helps me with measurements. All right, and again, back stitch. Take that pin out and just sew along the whole edge. All right, we are coming up on the end here. We're coming up close to here. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim this back. Remember, I made the binding long enough for all 4 of these placemats. So the first thing I'm going to do is, this is where I started it. I'm just going to cut this back a little bit, and I'm going to cut it on the diagonal. Just make sure you don't cut too much off so you're not past that edge. I just cut a little piece like that, and I'll save this for later. Or for the next placemat, excuse me. And then what I'm going to do is take this pin out, okay, peel back the top edge, so you still have that bottom edge on there, and I just like to pin this in place again. All right, and then this sort of, the rest of this binding, I tuck in there. I probably wouldn't leave quite that long a tail or whatever you want to call it, edge, strip. But for this, I'm just so you can see it. Okay, and I sort of fit that in there. And then I do pin here too, because stuff has a tendency to slide. All right. And then what I'm going to do is keep sewing that 1/4 inch up until that dot where I started. Gets kind of thick here. And then there's that where I started. I'm just going to back stitch again, excuse me. And there I have the back side the binding on for the first step. All right, so the binding is now on the back of the placemat. And now we need to flip it to the front. And then we're going to sew it again. And the corners, you do want to trim off these little threads here on the corners, just so they don't stick out or get in the way. All right, so this is the front. So you're going to flip that binding over all the way around. And this is where my clips come in handy. So what you're going to do is fold this up to the edge, okay? And I just clip all the way around this piece. and I do the corners, and basically it will sort of naturally form. Hopefully you can see that. So I folded, so let me get some let me get some clips, because I want to show you. Now some people will actually use glue, like a little bit of glue here. I prefer not to use glue. That's just how I do it. You can use glue if you want, but this folded over, and see how it naturally folded over and it formed that little 45-degree angle right there, which is good because that means hopefully the measurements are right. And then you're just going to fold this over, so you're going to get that nice little mitered corner. Hopefully you can see that. Let me put that up to the camera so you can see that. There we go. And I'm going to clip right on that so I get a nice sharp corner. And I'm just going to work my way around this whole piece before I sew it again. You might also, some people like to press it. I don't bother with that step. Maybe I should, but this is fine for me. I can just pull these forward, and I pull them nice and taut. And let me just show you what it looks like on the other side. So that would be what the back looks like. All right, it is clipped the way I want it to be clipped, and I'm just going to start where, maybe here, it doesn't really matter where you start, and I do a little tacking stitch down, or a back stitch, whatever you want to do. I sew an 1/8 of an inch just right along this edge. You just want it nice and neat here, right along this edge, and I'll just sew all around the placemat to keep this in place. When you get to the corners, keeping that, you're going to slow down, and you're just going to stitch in about an 1/8 of an inch, and I should actually have set my needle so it goes down. All right, and you're not going to cut the thread or anything. You're just going to put that needle down and turn it around, and then you're ready to keep sewing on this edge. And I just sort of fiddle with it along the way. All right, so here it is. It's all pressed. I did press it, and I clipped off any loose threads that were there. Love the way this turned out. Still a few little loose threads. Let me show you the back. Looks really cool. That's all that lining, that pretty batik fabric there. But this is the front. This is the main part, and I think these will look really pretty in my daughter's new apartment. All right, my placemats are all done. They've been trimmed. They've been sewn. They are ready to go. Let me just show you. Here's one. Here's two. I love that they look a little different. 3 and 4. And I'm really glad I got 4 out of that coat. That's really handy. Again, it all depends on the size of your coat or quilt that you're using. If you have an old quilt coat, or not an old one, or even just one that doesn't fit you don't wear anymore, and you don't want to donate, think about repurposing it into something more useful. Again, my daughter is just getting into her new apartment. She's going to love these. I'm going to make a gift basket for her. Very handy. I still have some left over. Great project. Easy project. This took me like an hour or something. I mean, it took me longer because I'm filming, but if I had done this without filming, it probably would have taken me, an hour tops. I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button. I always love new subscribers, and I try to come up with new projects. I'm over on Facebook, all under my business name, Create with Claudia. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, you name it, I'm there. I love doing tutorials and things like that. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a great day.